Norman, welcome to the show. Welcome to Brownsville.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back. What do you think of the little set here
This
with
is a
all the
cool
stuff?
setup, bro. Yeah, it's really cool. Uh, recognized a lot of these brands that you've got here. I was at the eBridge building last night. I just came from a site visit at Texas Southmost College, so you're on point. All the brands.
We're trying to keep it Brownsville driven.
Yeah,
Before we kind of get dive into the meat of everything you do now, can you kind of just walk us through your journey? I mean, I know that I heard you the other night, but for our viewers,
sure.
how do we get here?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me on this episode and this platform to tell the story, not about me, but all of the different podcast topics that you've done so far. I've gone back and watched a couple of them, but how I got here today. Last July, the board of directors, newest state agency in Texas, it's called the Texas Space Commission, asked me to be the first executive director for this new organization. And it's really a pleasure, and I'm humbled to be able to do that. But before here, I worked at Texas A&M on their government relations team for 10 years. Before that, I was on the government relations team for Texas Farm Bureau. Before that, I worked for a state senator. Before that, I worked for a state representative. I was a Senate Sergeant at Arms when I was in college. I did the internships around the Capitol. So in and around 20 years or so, I've always been working when it comes to state government on, thankfully, some of the biggest driving conversations that have an impact in multiple regions across the state, whether that was agriculture and everything that comes along with it, higher education and all the things that come along with that, or now space and all of the cool stuff that's affiliated with this topic.
That's awesome. And for those who may not be familiar, what exactly is the new role here of the Texas Space Commission?
Sure. So in 2023, the legislature, there were several state reps and state senators who were paying attention to the conversation with two of the largest commercial space companies in the world that happened to choose Texas as the location to operate. One of them is right here in the Rio Grande Valley, SpaceX. The other is out in far west Texas called Origin. So because in Austin, the policymakers were paying attention to what this new emerging ecosystem, a new economic indicator for the state, was having such an impact in these different regions around the Lone Star State, they started to say, we've got to learn about this. And how can Texas help? And how can we make sure that this new thing doesn't go away? So the joke became, who was the one person that can write the one pager about everything regarding the commercial space economy? Well, it's not one person, and it doesn't fit on one piece of paper. So quickly, the legislature, with the support of the governor, decided that we're going to go out and find the right group of people, start asking them questions. They're true experts in their field. The experiences that they've had, whether it was at Boeing or Lockheed or NASA, things up in Washington, D.C. or over in California and down in Florida. Let's pull together those Texans that can really help drive this conversation and ask them what the state should be doing to do two things. Make sure that those companies who are here in Texas today don't leave and their footprint is expanded. And then any of those companies that aren't yet here in Texas sees what we're doing and decides to come to Texas to set up shop. Not only to do launches, but also to do return and reentry programs, also to do research and development experimentations, also to do workforce training for all of the different jobs that are required to send stuff to space, conduct some really cool missions, benefits the rest of us here on Earth, mere mortals that will never leave the dirt, but will benefit from the kinds of technologies and innovation that occurs in zero gravity, and make sure that all happens somewhere in the Lone Star State.
That's awesome. I mean, look, here in Brownsville, we kind of feel a little bit of that, and I've had great conversations with people who have come here from all over the country, and they want to come see what's happening at SpaceX in our
Yeah.
backyard, and for the state to do this, I think like we feel it, and a lot of people have said, we get that feeling that here in Texas and Central and South Texas, and
Yeah.
that feeling that Hawthorne,
Mm-hmm.
California had 30, 40 years ago.
Great example.
we're feeling that here, where people are saying,
in real time.
and faster than
Yep.
we can imagine, right? There's people
Yes.
that are saying, if the future is in Texas, and
Yes.
so I need to move there.
Bingo.
I need to go there. I need to
Yes.
work there. I need to supply there. I need to go research there. I don't want to hang around other people like me.
That's right.
That and so we're super happy that I'm happy that you're on this show. I think this is going to be a very special episode for the viewers of Brownsville, especially because we kind of just see what's happening in our backyard, and we will talk about our backyard.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool to know like what's happening outside of just our region.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about the Texas space economy, right?
Yep.
We're becoming a major player in the space industry, from Houston to Brownsville to West Texas. You kind of answered that, but what do you think gives our state that edge right
Sure.
now?
So Texas has a proud history in the exploration of space, and it is centered in and around NASA Johnson Space Center just outside of Houston, Texas. The NASA operations in Texas supports more than 40,000 jobs, and it generates more than $9 billion in economic activity each year. So because of that legacy that happens to be centered around Space City, USA, which is Houston, there's a bunch of potential for other regions in the state. Speaking of our backyard here in the Valley, and I'm proud to say I get to claim a little bit of the backyard by saying our, because I was born in Harlingen and both my parents are from Brownsville. The rest of the state, throughout the country and around the world, people know what the Rio Grande Valley is. They know where it is. They know what's happening here because of the brand of SpaceX, and they want to come and be part of it. Not just going out to the El Segundos and the Hawthorns and the Long Beaches of California, not just going down to whatever's happening down in the outback of Australia or over in the European Union as well. There is so much opportunity. This is the place where people are going to continue to flock. The Texas Secretary of State recently made a speech, Jay Nelson, about space in Texas, and she said, years ago, a long time ago, the pioneers were on horseback when they came to Texas, and those who were already here that were trying to pave the way for what's next. Today, people are on rockets, and those rockets are blasting off from Cameron County, Texas, and the world watches every single time it happens. It's really cool to go around the country, around the state, and see people come to Texas from around the world and say Boca Chica Beach like they've been there because they've seen it so many times, they've read about it so many times, they've watched all of the cool video and conversations and things like this podcast, hopefully as well, will help tell that story. The things that are happening down here are almost the impossible. And the people who are helping to do it are native Brownsville, people who are native Texans, or people from other parts of the state that want to come down here and be part of it. It's incredible. It really, really is incredible. I'm just glad that I get to be part of the narrative of telling the story, honestly.
I mean, I'll tell you one thing. A lot of people, the viewers, don't know that we've known each other for a very long time. We're both part of an amazing leadership organization
Neither of us had gray hair when we met.
That's right, the National Hispanic Institute.
Yes, sir.
And we met a long time ago, and never would I thought in a million years that I would be a city commissioner for Brownsville, SpaceX, rockets launching, and then to see you direct that space commission. It's phenomenal. I want to stay in the topic of the state.
Sure.
There's been a lot of conversation about the public-private partnerships. How is your commission working with companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX? How does that connection work?
Sure. So first off, like I said, those were the two main conversation points about why the legislature decided to pay attention to the commercial space economy in Texas, because those two brands in particular decided on their own they wanted to be present in Texas. So happens to be 9 people on the board of directors for the Texas Space Commission, 3 appointed by the governor, 3 appointed by the lieutenant governor, and 3 appointed by the Speaker of the Texas House. Some of those people who were appointed have a direct connection to those 2 brands that you just mentioned, SpaceX and Blue Origin. Kathy Leaders, who has been the manager at Starbase right here in Brownsville for SpaceX is the vice chair of my board of directors. The lady who is the chair of the Texas Space Commission, her name is Gwen Griffin. She's been affiliated with the nonprofit side of Blue Origin called Club for the Future for several years, making sure that that presence in Texas is spread throughout a bunch of STEM nonprofit organizations around the country, but especially here in Texas. So I get to work for these two ladies that have a direct connection to those two brands that you just asked me about. But other people on our board work for Lockheed and Boeing. Other people on our board are retired astronauts, PhD, research faculty, also retired Army aviator, colonel. A lot of connection also to the national defense conversation when it comes to what's happening in orbit for the daily lives that you, me, and your viewers enjoy every day. There's a whole different domain when it comes to national defense, and that happens to be off this planet. So there's the newest military branch called the U.S. Space Force. The Texas Space Commission would love to make sure that activities such as what is occurring through SpaceX or Blue Origin is also supporting the national defense priorities when it comes to orbit. Think of things like satellites. How many times do you look at your phone every day?
Yeah. Hundreds.
It doesn't work if there aren't satellites that are secure. So you have to be able to have the rocket to get up there, make sure that the constellations are in order, what kind of maintenance and operation is required. But then there's debris that you have to account for, so maybe you have to move those satellites in and around. But it's also a matter of deterrence when it comes to some of the adversaries around the world who don't have the best interest in mind for the way you and I live our lives, viewers here today as well. And these technologies are being worked on by different companies that are located in Texas. They aren't all here in the Valley, but they're somewhere in Texas. So who's to say that maybe there's a 5-year-old today that wants to work in the space industry one day? They don't necessarily have to be part of the rocket launch operations from Starbase. They could be working on the suits, the next generation of astronaut suits that are being made in Houston, Texas. They can be part of the bigger team that's trying to design the next International Space Station. They can be part of a team of roboticists that are helping to figure out the right conditions for the next lander to hit the surface of the moon and do some incredible experimentation, all within Texas from different companies that are throughout the Lone Star State. That's the cool opportunity. Definitely a big connection right here in Brownsville, but all across the state. That's why the Texas Space Commission is in existence and why we have the board of directors with the expertise and the experiences that they bring to the table and the big ideas that we're trying to enable. So the Texas Space Commission is administering a $150 million grant program. In 2023, the legislature parked $150 million to administer a grant program. The board has awarded all but about 32 million of that 150 so far. And the board was only appointed a year ago. So they've been realizing that there is a high demand signal from multiple entities across the state to figure out the next big idea that will occur in zero gravity.
And for the viewers, because we had a chance to talk at the state capitol about this.
Yep.
So you're awarding 150 million, right? What was the ask of all the applications? How much money was asked for?
Good question. So our grant application was open for about 4 months. We received 281 applications from 140 unique entities across the state, and combined, those 281 proposals totaled $3.46 billion. And we only have $150 million.
Yeah.
So the demand signal is there. There's a lot of people who have ideas of what the next big innovation should be when it comes to space flight and space exploration.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Moving things a little bit more regional, and especially Brownsville, as a lot of the viewers here are going to be from Brownsville. How do you see the future of Starbase? When it comes down to the larger, like, what's Starbase going to do for the future here of the region that you can talk about?
Well, I don't have every piece of the inside baseball conversation when it comes to SpaceX, believe it or not.
Sure.
But here's what I'm observing today. They are preparing themselves to be essentially um, a redundant resource to the United States government to ensure that whatever capabilities are necessary for our daily lives occurs for two reasons. One, the International Space Station, it's been discussed, will be decommissioned one day. If and when that occurs, there cannot be a gap or a lack of human presence,
Mhm.
specifically American human presence in space. So Starbase hopefully is going to help ensure that there is no gap, because there's other companies in Texas like Intuitive Machines and Origin and Axiom and Voyager and Starlab who are trying to collectively fill the gap if and when the International Space Station is decommissioned, that the United States of America still has the chance to have a human presence in orbit. NASA has not started to design or build a new International Space Station. That has been taken up by the private sector. So Starbase, back to your question, is going to make sure, I believe, that whatever assets need to be in orbit is able to get up there. It's a redundant opportunity for the other launch sites around the country. But because this particular brand is able to carry a certain kind of payload, I think Texas and right here in the Valley specifically, unbeknownst to probably a lot of humanity around the world, this is going to be the place where our daily lives are secured because of the things that are launched from here, utilizing the technologies that are innovated in different parts of the state. That's really an important story to tell.
That is, and from things that we hear here at our level, right now I think there's like 4,300 employees
Okay.
in SpaceX,
Yep.
and there's numbers all the way up to possibly they want to rev up to 10,000 employees
Yeah.
within the next 12 to 16 months.
Sure.
So when you look at that, right, the growth, people are scared. People are like, what's going to happen? I hear rumors of weekly launches or bi-weekly launches. And so there's that fear because there's the unknown. The known that we have here in the city, just for you to kind of know,
Yep.
Brownsville's growing to the point where currently right now we have 32 subdivisions being are under construction.
Wow.
There's two major master plan communities being built
All within the city limits.
within the city limits,
Wow.
right? And so, our region is growing.
Yeah.
Not just Cameron County, the Rio Grande Valley,
Yeah.
but Brownsville specifically has this massive growth and influx of people. We just recently had 1,200 families with a household income of over $200,000 move here.
Wow.
Right. So when you look at Brownsville,
Yeah.
the demographics are changing.
Sure.
Right. The demographics and SpaceX is definitely a big catalyst for
Yeah.
that. But I think sometimes it's important to have you or just people to see that this is not just something here in the backyard.
Yeah.
This is statewide.
Yeah.
This is worldwide.
Literally.
This is universal wide, right? And
one.
having it here
Yeah.
in our backyard, a big part of it, right, is important. What opportunities do you see for communities like Brownsville when it comes to workforce development, education,
Sure.
and infrastructure?
So as I've been going around the state, I've had conversations similar to this, but not necessarily in a podcast cool environment such as this. I've gone to places like Laredo. I've gone to places like El Paso. I've gone to places like Midland, Dallas, Fort Worth, of course, in and around the Houston area, and San Antonio and Austin, Central Texas as well. What I'm encouraging all of the local leadership and then the folks that, whether they're at the high school level or a university or college campus, much less the private sector, is to organize, self-organize, and coalesce behind a singular plan. What I mean by that is, what part of the space puzzle, and they've got a lot of pieces to it, would Brownsville like to really be? What's the corner of the big puzzle board that Brownsville Valley would like to really own or provide? And then the other corner is, what does West Texas want to do? The other corner is what does North Texas want to do? And the other corner is what does the Houston region want to continue to do, et cetera. Places in and around Central Texas, like Williamson County and Burnett County, just outside of Austin, they've decided to establish what's called a Spaceport Development Corporation. Many spaceport development corporations once upon a time existed in different parts of the state. This was before SpaceX decided on Boca Chica as their spot, before Blue Origin picked Van Horn as their spot.
Mhm.
But after those decisions were made, those local communities that had established that Spaceport Development Corporation essentially just let it dissolve. But there's places now that want to create one. The example most recently is Burnett and Williamson County jointly created a Spaceport Development Corporation. What that does is it helps send a signal to the private sector, to companies that are thinking, where should I set up shop? Satellite manufacturers is going to become one of the next hottest type of manufacturing opportunities when it comes to the space economy. The city of Fort Worth decided on their airport to use their own money and build a building and then go find somebody in the space world to lease it and occupy that space. They found one. It's called eSpace. eSpace is coming in. They're going to manufacture satellites, and their product is going to be moved on an aircraft that never has to leave their airport. It's a matter of logistical convenience, maximum efficiency. So things that perhaps Brownsville can do is figuring out what part of the puzzle they want to really own or really
Mhm.
fit together, and then come up with those ideas so that you're attracting those next SpaceX companies to say, Brownsville has decided as a local community at the local level that they want more presence of the commercial space economy. And if that happens, I believe one day places like NASA, places like the United States Space Force and other entities in the Department of Defense might start paying more attention and realize that there's human capital, there's local support, and there's a plethora of opportunity. And then they start coming down here as well. So those stats that you just told me,
Yeah.
they're probably going to continue to grow exponentially if all of this comes together nicely for the Valley.
Yeah. So like the 12-year-old kid that's going to watch,
Yeah.
right? That says, I want to be an astronaut
Yeah.
or I want to be involved in something. Advice from Norman Garza, in school.
Sure.
What STEM obviously is a big deal.
It is. But sometimes that term is too broad and not as concrete for either me or a 12-year-old to really wrap our minds around. So I'll give these kinds of examples. Coding is a language. Just like learning a foreign language or maybe sign language or some kind of other operating system, coding is one of the most important basic foundations that I've understood is a need from employers. So a 12-year-old kid should start learning different kinds of software coding programs early on and really get to become familiar with how that then informs whatever digital game or device it is that they use. And maybe one day, instead of just picking up the phone, they're picking up a tablet or some kind of a software hardware piece of equipment that they're not just playing on, but they're testing and evaluating because if eventually it needs to be commercialized and put onto a rocket and it then goes to space. So coding, I know there's a bunch of robotic clubs. Maybe don't always spend your time on the football field, coach, and spend some time learning how to build robotics and also how to create code that will inform the use of these technologies.
Awesome. So we talked to one kid. Now, the Brownsville students that are watching, right?
Okay.
What would you tell them about why space matters in their future?
Sure. That is the question. Seriously, and it has been for a while. But when it comes to sort of a policy question, and I'll go back to the non kind of technical answer to your question. First, legislators had to decide why $150 million was important to park for space-related activities versus more money for schools or more money for roads and more money for all of the demands that the legislature has to fund. But the true answer to your question is, for the rest of those students watching this podcast, is space matters because everything you do in your daily life has some kind of a digital component that is controlled or operated in zero gravity and you don't even realize it. And if that is not secure, then the stuff that you might get to do after school or all summer long or in the evenings after you're done with your chores and working is just not going to be possible. And the other thing is there's constantly new kinds of medicines that are being experimented and truly commercialized in zero gravity. There's just so much more advantage to doing things in orbit versus doing things on Earth. Back to those devices, one of the other major economic indicators in Texas right now happens to be in the semiconductor industry. There's major chip fabrication plants in different parts of the state. There's now conversations about manufacturing wafers, the chips, on an international space station that has 1 or 0 humans on it, that's just popping out these chips that eventually get sent back to Earth. And the quality of that chip that is manufactured in space for our phones and for all the electronics that we're using will have a higher calibration, a higher durability, and a higher efficacy than a chip that's being manufactured in a plant here on Earth. It's that kind of mind-blowing examples that a 12-year-old or a high school graduate, college student, or my 80-plus-year-old grandmother, I won't say exactly how old she is, that lived on Renfro Boulevard right here in Brownsville, Texas, should appreciate and understand when it comes to the opportunities about why space.
Um, Now moving more towards policy, right? Talking to the students, we're talking to kind of the young crowd. Now policy.
Okay.
What are you most proud of championing? Not just in your space commission,
Okay.
hopefully space commission, but in your time around the Capitol.
I think really the way to answer your question is I've been able to be part of some really big conversations, big ideas for Texas that have an impact across the state that not everybody realizes, at least on day one, but hopefully eventually they will. Whether it was at A&M when it came to Army Futures Command, whether it's right now at the Space Commission when it comes to NASA, whether it was when I was at the Farm Bureau and we were working on some major pieces of legislation that dealt with eminent domain and water policy, transportation, all of these other kinds of ancillary topics that support the greater conversation. Everything that I've had the privilege of working on at the Capitol to date truly does have a direct impact on every person's life in Texas. The laws or the funding and the resources that support all of these things, it's either the food or the energy that we use or the parts of the state that we get to go explore. I've been able to be part of teams working on these topics that doesn't necessarily have a political affiliation. It doesn't necessarily have a sole application in just the suburban parts of the state or only the rural parts of the state. Every person in Texas, the stuff that I've gotten to work on truly is impacted at some point in time. And for me, it's rewarding that what I'm working on are things that are for the benefit of your everyday Texan.
How about after stepping into this role? What is it that you guys are looking like? Any policy out there that you're working with your board? Anything that you guys think as you start seeing the future and you're all over the state talking to every entity around, receiving $3 billion of asks, right? Is there anything that you're kind of working on or that you're looking at with your board of directors?
Sure. So the board is very interested in more NASA programs and more Space Force activities to be located in different parts of the state. So in order for that to happen, you have to have human capital. And the human capital has to be trained accordingly. They have to be educated properly. And then you have to have the local community support to truly be the home base for whatever that is. And so for me and my board, what they are truly trying to understand is what is the next set of requirements coming out of NASA? What is the next set of requirements coming out of the Department of Defense? And how can Texas and the governor and the legislature support those endeavors? And how can people in Texas be part of it? And then, hopefully, at the end of the day, it's not just different parts of Texas having healthy competition amongst themselves to have a piece of the puzzle. It really becomes a little bit of a braggadocious conversation where other states are looking at what's happening in Texas and other countries are looking at what's happening in Texas. And it's not bragging if it's the truth. So the board of the Texas Space Commission is really set on delivering some high expectations from the governor and the legislature to capture all of those opportunities as much as possible and as frequently as possible as well.
That's awesome. What legacy? Let's like now look into the future, right? Everything in space, we talk about the future. In the Texas Space Commission, 20, 30 years from now, Norman is getting ready to retire
I'll be on a fishing boat at the island.
and eating nachos at Vermilion.
Definitely.
Um, what legacy do you want in the next 20, 30 years on behalf of the Texas Space Commission?
Sure. So ideally, at that point in time, the Texas Space Commission has enabled a laundry list of innovative technologies that is being used throughout the commercial space industry. There's a larger presence of whatever NASA might be called, or maybe it's still exactly the way it is today, that's anchored in different parts of Texas. There's manufacturing happening all over the state. There's multiple communities rowing the boat in the same direction, all for the opportunities when it comes to outer space. I don't know if in 20 years there's going to be a colony on Mars or a community on the moon or something like a Star Trek mega ship that's just out there circling around the globe. But the legacy of the Texas Space Commission in 20 or 30 years should be that whatever it is in reality, it happened because of the support of Texans. And altogether, there was this energy, this invigoration that hasn't really been truly part of everybody's thinking since the early days of the shuttle program. So today, whether it's the 80-year-olds or the newest person born right here in Cameron County, I would love to look back and know that everyone is excited about space in 20 years or 30 years because the Texas Space Commission helped get them excited for the past 20, 30 years and get in the game and figure out how they can participate in the bigger picture. It's not that Texas has to figure out the next, power generation or the next hardware or the next kind of device that is required to sustain life long term. If that happens and that's what we get to point back to in 20, 30 years, great. Is that what we're going to put the marker on the table for today? But want to make sure that the legacy of the commission is that the reality in 20, 30 years was because the Texas Space Commission and the legislature enabled continuously over those 20 or 30 years or however many into the future we're going to talk about.
Awesome. What's one thing most Texas don't know about space exploration in our state and should?
Good question.
I learned one, and so I'm going to steal it from you. I learned one from you the other day at the symposium.
Is it the landing? Okay,
No,
go ahead.
no.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk about the landing,
Yeah.
about how many actual ports
Yeah,
we have,
sure.
right?
Right. So,
But then come back to the landing because
Okay.
I'll hold you to that.
all right, I will. So in Texas, the FAA gets to designate spaceports. Some are categorized as public spaceports, and some of them are categorized as private spaceports. In Texas, there are 2 public spaceports designated by the FAA. Not a lot of people know. One is in Houston, but it's not at the Houston Airport, Bush Intercontinental or Hobby. It's at Ellington Field. Ellington Field is a joint reserve base, and it's where the astronaut pilots have trained for decades. The T-38s are still kept there, and they have some incredible companies that are on site that are working on engines, the most efficient engines that can move either a airplane, a satellite, maybe a ballistic, or even a rocket at hypersonic speeds. Do you remember the Concorde airplane?
Yeah.
It flew at supersonic speed. What if one day there was an aircraft that you and I got to ride on that moves around the planet at hypersonic speeds? That would be a game changer when it comes to our daily lives and the world's economy. But Ellington Field, just down the road from Johnson Space Center, is one of two public spaceports designated by the FAA. The other is in Midland, Texas. Not a lot of people know that. We also have three private spaceports designated by the FAA. One is right here in Cameron County, Boca Chica. The other is in McGregor. And the third is out in Culberson County, where Blue Origin launches from outside of Van Horn.
So 5
five together.
spaceports, 2
Yes, sir.
public, 3 private.
That's right.
Now the landing, because
Yeah.
you were going to say, what is it that people don't know about space exploration but should know?
Yep. So I'm going to start the question or the answer with a question. Hopefully, most Texans know when Texas Independence Day is. It happens to be in early March. So if you didn't know that, then you learned something new as well. But on Texas Independence Day 2025, a company called Firefly, which is located in Cedar Park, Texas, just outside of Austin, landed a lunar lander on the surface of the moon. It was an incredible moment because while that lander was operating on the surface of the moon, there was a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse, depending on whether you were on Earth or on the moon. And it was a robot that was on the moon that got to take a photograph that Texans should go and look at the Firefly website and see the juxtaposition of the vantage from a solar eclipse versus a lunar eclipse at the exact same moment in time. And that image was captured by a device that was built in Texas, and it was launched and it landed, and the control center was in Cedar Park, Texas. This is huge. A second company, just a few days later, also from Texas, called Intuitive Machines, which is in Houston, also landed on the moon. Texans need to know that in the last 5 months, some incredible milestones have happened by some major brands that are located here in Texas. Blue Origin had their New Shepard launch successfully. SpaceX has now done its 9th test launch. Intuitive Machines landed on the moon, and Firefly landed on the moon. For the first time in history, all at once, within a matter of 5 months, 4 incredible Texas companies have done some major milestones off this planet. Every Texan should know that. They should be proud of it, and they should want to be part of it. That's what my answer to your viewers is.
That's exciting for me because I knew about 3 of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not the 4th.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
that's phenomenal. Norman, as we start wrapping it up, I know that you're very busy. You travel everywhere. Everyone wants to visit with you. Everybody's excited to hear about space, about the future, about everything we just discussed.
Yep.
What keeps you inspired to keep doing this job?
The inspiration for me is the people who are involved. The people who are involved start with the folks that made this possible, who are elected officials in Austin at the legislature that decided in 2023, and they continue to support in 2025, the idea of this entity called the Space Commission to help every region of the state. Again, this wasn't a D versus an R, or urban versus a suburban or a rural debate at the Capitol. And so I'm inspired that our lawmakers have decided to put forth the resources and the policy to enable this opportunity to convene the experts who are on my board. So that's the second group of people that inspire me. The folks who are on this board of directors. I encourage everybody to go look at the people who were appointed to our governing body called the Texas Space Commission Board, and also our advisory body, which is our non-governing entity, and it's a consortium. Also, some incredible academicians, former astronaut, business entrepreneurs, etc. I get to work with these 2 groups of 9. They inspire me. And then, to your point of me traveling across the state, I'm inspired by people who just want to hear about it. There's a bunch of noise out there. There's a bunch of conversations taking place, and everybody's trying to, find their way to tell their story. I'm inspired that people like you and other folks like the city and the county and the region down here in particular, who invite me and my board members to participate in these kinds of conversations and tell the story. So without all of these different groups of people, it would be almost boring for me to get up every day and do this job. But that's what's inspiring for me.
That's awesome. Any last things? Anything that you want to say? You were on the symposium. Anything we didn't talk about?
Yeah,
Anything I didn't
so
ask questions about that you'd like to have on record here?
let's see. On Wednesday, I was here for the Space Symposium, and I think tonight I'm part of the Space Fest. So I think it is incredible that Brownsville has decided to do this kind of exciting programming for the community. I'd encourage that to occur more frequently, not just once a year. But the other thing that I have to put out there is the website for the Texas Space Commission.
Mhm.
It's a really cool website to say, space.texas.gov. And folks can go to our website and they can sign up to be on our mailing list. And every time we put out a press release, whether it's about a grant or a major milestone from some of these companies that are based in Texas, it'll pop up. It's usually a short blurb. You don't have to read a whole novel about whatever it is that we're trying to share with everybody. But I encourage you to go to our website and sign up for our mailing list so you can keep up with what we're doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any thank yous? Any last thing? Anything else?
Thank you, Tino, for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
I hope that everybody got a little chance to hear just a tad bit about the Texas Space Commission. This is Norman Garza. He's a director of the Space Commission. Like he said, join their website, find out some more. We are very fortunate to live in this area. We get to see it front and center. The last piece before I sign off is for our viewers. I think we heard at the symposium, this is probably the closest you can get to a rocket launch, supposedly, right? They
That's
said
correct.
that here at Boca Chica Beach,
Yeah.
right?
The distance from, but you got to be safe. You can get so close to watch that rocket launch, which is not the same vantage that people have when they're watching launches from Cape Canaveral or from Wallops or Vandy or over in the European and further out across the world. You can get such a close vantage point. And if you haven't yet, go watch a launch.
Yeah.
That's part of the inspiration to the next generation of folks to understand. When I was a kid coming down and hanging out here at my grandparents' house in Brownsville, my siblings and my cousins and I would sometimes be playing in the backyard and we'd look up. My mom's parents lived on Bowie Street and we would watch the planes landing at the airport. For me, my memory is watching planes take off and land. For kids today, their memory can be watching launches, rockets launched, going up and coming down. That's incredible. Talk about inspiration. And it's happening right here in Brownsville.
That's awesome. Guys, there you have it. That's our episode wrap up. Norman Garza, Texas Space Commission. We'll catch you next time, Brownsville. Thank you.